When British actor James Mason passed away in 1984, the world believed his story had been written in full. He was remembered as one of Hollywood's most refined leading men, a star who carried himself with charm, wit, and quiet sophistication. His performances in films like A Star is Born and North by Northwest cemented him as a cinematic legend. But decades after his death, a shocking discovery inside his family's old home in Switzerland changed everything. Hidden away in the dusty attic of his estate, a single tape was found, unmarked, forgotten, and sealed in a box that hadn't been opened in years. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, just another relic from a life long gone. But when it was finally played, those who heard it realized this was no ordinary recording. What James Mason had spoken into that tape was never meant for the public's ears. The voice of the late actor echoed from the past, raw and unguarded, revealing secrets and truths that had remained buried for decades. For fans, historians, and even Mason's family, the discovery was both mesmerizing and heartbreaking. The tape pulled back the curtain on a man the world thought they knew, exposing a private side of James Mason that had been carefully hidden. Throughout his career, this is the story of the tape that was never meant to be heard, and how its discovery changed the way the world remembers James Mason. James Mason was never the typical Hollywood star. Born in 1909 in Huddersfield, England, he carried into adulthood a soft-spoken intellect, a sharp wit, and a refined presence that stood in stark contrast to the brash energy of American leading men. Where others relied on sheer force of charisma, Mason brought subtlety, a voice that was instantly recognizable, and a screen presence that conveyed depth without effort. His journey to the top wasn't a straightforward one. Mason originally studied architecture at Cambridge, hardly envisioning himself as an actor. Yet the lure of the stage proved irresistible. In the 1930s, he began acting in repertory theater, where his rich voice and restrained style caught attention. British cinema soon came calling, and by the time World War II ended, Mason had become one of the United Kingdom's most bankable stars. Hollywood eventually opened its golden gates, and Mason crossed the Atlantic, carving out a career that spanned more than 4 decades. His roles ranged from the cynical Norman Maine in A Star is Born, 1954, to the suave villain Philip Van Damme in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, 1959. He could play romantic heroes, tortured souls, or charming antagonists with equal ease. Unlike many contemporaries, Mason never seemed trapped in a single box, but behind the scenes he was notoriously private. Though he enjoyed success and critical acclaim, Mason was never comfortable with the machinery of fame. He often withdrew from the press, preferring the quiet of his home life to Hollywood parties. His marriage to actress Pamela Mason was turbulent and highly publicized, filled with financial disputes and accusations, yet he never offered the world a detailed glimpse into his side of the story. Friends described him as both warm and distant, a man who cared deeply but revealed little. That distance created an aura of mystery around him. To the public, James Mason was the epitome of refinement and sophistication, but those who knew him closely hinted there was more beneath the surface. He was, they said, a man of contradictions, deeply passionate yet guarded, longing for peace yet embroiled in personal turmoil. As the years went on and his career slowed, Mason's retreat from the spotlight grew more pronounced. By the time of his passing in 1984, he had left behind not only a vast body of work, but also a lingering sense that the world had only seen part of who he truly was. His fans adored the elegance he brought to every role, but his closest confidants knew that he carried secrets, thoughts, regrets, and emotions that he kept carefully hidden from public view. It wasn't until decades later, when a long-forgotten box was opened in the attic of his Swiss estate, that some of those secrets would finally come to light. What lay inside that dusty box was never intended for audiences or even for history. It was private, personal, and it was the key to understanding the man behind the actor. It began as a simple act of cleaning. Decades after James Mason's passing, his old estate in Switzerland was being sorted through by family and archivists. The attic, a place few had ventured into for years, was a repository of forgotten memories, dusty boxes filled with scripts, yellowing photographs, letters, and personal belongings no one had touched since the 1980s. Most of it was expected, typical remnants of a long and storied life. But among the clutter was a small, unmarked cardboard box, its edges softened with age, sealed with brittle tape that nearly crumbled at a touch. Inside lay a reel-to-reel audio tape. No label, no date, no explanation. At first, it seemed like nothing more than an artifact of another era. Mason, like many actors of his generation, had lived through a time when recording thoughts or dictating letters on tape recorders was common. But there was something about this one, its placement, its careful concealment, that hinted at intention. It wasn't casually left behind. It had been tucked away, hidden in a way that suggested Mason never wanted it to be found. The decision to play it didn't come immediately. Some members of Mason's family were hesitant. What if it contained private musings never meant for public ears? What if it revealed painful truths? But curiosity proved stronger. When the reel was threaded through a player and the switch was flipped, the faint hiss of analog sound filled the room, followed by a voice unmistakable even after so many years, James Mason's. At first, it was disorienting. To hear the elegant cadence of Mason's voice, speaking not through a character in a film but as himself, was almost ghostly. The opening words were quiet, reflective, and heavy with a tone no one had ever heard from him in public. This was not James Mason the actor, but James Mason the man, stripped of performance, stripped of pretense. Those present at the first playback would later describe the experience as haunting. The tape was not casual dictation or idle musings. It carried weight. It felt intentional, as if Mason had been unburdening himself in the privacy of his attic, leaving behind a confession or testament that even he could not share during his lifetime. The atmosphere in the room shifted as his words filled the space, each sentence pulling the listeners deeper into the private world of a man they thought they knew. Rumors soon began to swirl about the contents. Family members kept silent, offering no official comment, but whispers spread quickly, claims that the tape contained regrets about his marriage, reflections on his career, and even thoughts about Hollywood's darker corners that he had never dared speak publicly. The mystery only grew as speculation mounted. For film historians, the very existence of the tape was extraordinary. Here was one of the great actors of the 20th century, leaving behind something deeply personal, almost confessional. It wasn't part of his curated image, nor was it crafted for interviews or publicity. It was raw, unfiltered truth, whatever that truth turned out to be. The attic discovery soon became the centerpiece of debate. Should its contents be revealed? Was it right to let the world hear what Mason himself had hidden? Or should it remain sealed, respected as the private thoughts of a man who never chose to share them? What was clear was this: the tape, whether heard or not, had already reshaped the way people thought about James Mason. It was proof that behind the elegance and control of his public image lay a man wrestling with thoughts so heavy he had to capture them in secret, then hide them away, and that was just the beginning. The real shock came when the contents were finally heard in full, a revelation that would not only surprise fans but forever change the story of James Mason's life. The deeper the contents of the attic tape were examined, the clearer it became that James Mason was not just the suave, commanding figure audiences adored on screen. Within those private recordings, the actor revealed moments of raw honesty that rarely surfaced in his public life. His voice carried an unguarded vulnerability, an admission of the loneliness, insecurities, and emotional battles that plagued him despite the fame and fortune he had achieved. Mason had long been known for his brooding on-screen persona, but the tape revealed that much of it came from genuine experiences of inner turmoil. He spoke of strained relationships, his constant battle between career ambitions and personal fulfillment, and his fear of being forgotten in an industry that always seemed ready to move on to the next rising star. For an actor who had built a legacy on control and poise, hearing his voice crack under the weight of his own confessions was haunting. Friends and colleagues who later heard portions of the tape expressed shock at how candid Mason had been. Many admitted they had never suspected the depth of his struggles. Some believed that the tape might have been a form of therapy for him, his private way of unburdening thoughts he could not share with those around him. In the end, the discovery of the recording shed light on the human side of a man who had always seemed larger than life. Rather than tarnishing his legacy, the tape deepened the understanding of who James Mason truly was. It reminded the world that behind the commanding performances and timeless charm was a man navigating the same battles of doubt, regret, and longing that many face in silence. The attic tape, once hidden and never meant for the public ear, has now become an unexpected piece of James Mason's legacy. For decades, his name was tied to iconic roles and a career defined by elegance, intelligence, and a presence that commanded the screen. But this discovery revealed something different. It painted him as not just a star, but a man who wrestled with doubts, regrets, and memories that time never healed. Historians, biographers, and fans alike began to view Mason in a new light. Instead of diminishing his stature, the recording amplified it, showing the depth of the human being behind the carefully crafted Hollywood persona. For many, it was a reminder that fame does not shield one from vulnerability. The same voice that once delivered legendary lines on film was, in those attic recordings, trembling and unpolished, yet perhaps more powerful because of it. The tape has since been debated endlessly. Should it have remained hidden, respecting Mason's privacy, or was its discovery a gift, allowing the world to finally know the man behind the mystique? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. The attic recording ensured that James Mason would not simply be remembered for the characters he played, but also for the truth he unintentionally left behind. In the end, the tape serves as both a haunting echo of Mason's inner world and a powerful reminder of the fragility of even the brightest stars. And while he may have never intended for it to be heard, its existence has added a new chapter to his story, one that is just as compelling as anything he ever brought to the silver screen.